Hi, my name is Melina, and thank you so much for being here because today we are finally going to be recapping season 2 of The Umbrella Academy. Okay, it's been a while since I've been here. A lot of new things have happened. The biggest new thing is that I got a full time job, and full time jobs don't really allow you to do YouTube essays on the side. So I don't have a lot of time or energy to research stuff. So apologies if you were waiting for a new video. I can't imagine people were waiting for a new video from me. But I do know that people, and by people I mean the one person that I know watches this and has been asking for it. I love you, baby girl. Anyway, so we're here now, so let's just start recapping season 2. But before we actually do that, here's a brief overview of where we left off. So, the main gist of season 1, if you forgot, is that on October 1st, 1989, 42 children around the world were miraculously born to women who were not pregnant when the day began. Eccentric billionaire Reginald Hargreaves, he is on this board. This is where we left off on season 1 in our season 1 video. Reginald Hargreaves, he's right here. He's dead. He died in season 1, but he, in 1989, he adopted 7 of those children because he knew psychically, spiritually, not really sure how, but he did. He knew that these children had superpowers. And the children are all up here. They are Luther, Diego, Allison, Klaus, Five, Ben, and Victor. He adopts all of these children. They all have powers except for Victor, except for the fact that Victor actually does have powers. Reginald just drugged him his entire life to keep those powers a secret because they were too dangerous and world destroying. And they were so world destroying that Victor's powers caused the apocalypse that Five came back in time to stop. That wasn't a sentence, but it doesn't fucking matter. So the whole gist of season 1 is that the gang, but mostly Five, but the gang are trying to stop the apocalypse that Victor causes. And the season ends with the moon, chunks of the moon hitting the earth and blowing the earth up. But before that, they can all blow up. Five time travels the family back to an unspecified time and location. And that is where we left off in season 1. And this is where we pick up in season 2. Did you get all that? I hope you did. So, season 2 opens with the blue vortex of Five's time traveling powers spitting out Ben and Klaus in an alleyway in Dallas, Texas, February 1960. So, we really overshot. They were planning on going back in time for like a week to stop the apocalypse. They went back like 60 years. So it turns out that Five's ability to time travel still isn't really good. He hasn't figured out how to do it properly. So all of the siblings are spit out of the time vortex at different points in the 60s in Dallas, Texas. Okay, so Allison, who still cannot speak, she is still without a voice because towards the end of season 1, Victor slashed Allison's throat in a rage. Almost died, she's fine, she just can't speak. She is spit out in 1961, Dallas, Texas, and she discovers pre-civil rights segregation, racism. Luther is spit out in 1962, Diego on September 1st, 1963, and he immediately becomes obsessed with JFK. Because if you recall, if you know this from history, JFK is assassinated in 1963. This is going to be an important plot point, so I want you to remember that JFK was assassinated in 1963. And then Victor, who was unconscious and passed out from when the time traveling happened, Victor lands on October 12th, 1963, and he immediately gets hit by a car, which causes amnesia. Awesome. Now, Five is the last sibling to appear in Dallas. He arrives on November 25th, 1963. And this is the alternate universe in which the Soviets attacked the United States because JFK declared war on the USSR. So now nuclear war is happening. All of the rest of the family, they're wearing matching black outfits. They have power-ups. They are fighting the Soviets to Frank Sinatra's My Way. And then Five is like, what the fuck is going on? But then Hazel, do you remember Hazel from season 1? Yeah, Hazel shows up. He's an old man now. Old man Hazel takes 5 to 10 days before Apocalypse 2.0 occurs. Does this make sense? Yeah. So Five shows up on November 25th. Old man Hazel takes him back to November 15th. Old Man Hazel fills Five in on what's going on, what the fuck was happening with the nuclear war. And then the Swedes, who are these guys right here, they're triplets. That's what Wikipedia says. Clearly not triplets. There's clearly like an age ranking going on here. But the Swedes, who are commission agents, the commission is the time cops. That's the best I can describe it. The Swedes show up, gun down the street, murdering Hazel, and then they try to gun down Five, but he escapes and he survives, and it's all good. Super. Also, before Hazel is murdered, he slips something into Five's pocket. This will come back later. I didn't mention this earlier, but all of the siblings arrived in the exact same alleyway, and there is this guy named Elliot. This is Elliot right over here. There's this guy named Elliot who like has the apartment that faces that alleyway. He notices all of this. He starts like monitoring the alleyway. He's doing this because he believes that they're aliens. It's not really important. Elliot and Five team up a little bit because Elliot actually does have information about the siblings, and he's been tracking all of them. And he also knows where Diego is. And Diego is actually in a mental institution. Oh, I need to change the slide because Hazel's dead. RIP to Hazel. So Elliot tells Five that Diego was arrested shortly after arriving in Dallas, Texas, and he was arrested because he was stalking Lee Harvey Oswald, who, if you recall, assassinated JFK. And the reason that Diego was stalking Lee Harvey Oswald is because he is obsessed with saving JFK. He was arrested and he was put in a psychiatric ward. I'm just not going to talk about what Diego looks like in this season because genuinely it's horrendous. I don't like this look. I think it is his worst look out of all 4 seasons. I understand why he looks like this. He was in a psychiatric ward for a while. Anyways, so the psychiatrist at the psychiatric ward is trying to pin some sort of Oedipus complex on Diego. Not the whole like fucking your mom part of the Oedipus complex, but the part of the Oedipus complex that's like, I have this innate desire to overpower my father and to replace my father as the powerful person in the family unit. Do people know that reading of the Oedipus complex? Or do people only know the fucking my mom part of it? Which has also been applied to Hamlet because the analysis of Hamlet with the Oedipus complex is that Hamlet is supposed to avenge his father, but he keeps resisting and he keeps hesitating because his role, like the role of the father and the son in this scenario is like the son is supposed to kill the father. Like the son is supposed to replace the father, but then the father was already murdered. So like he has no role anymore, so he's confused about what he's supposed to do. Anyways, this doesn't fucking matter. The point is that in the psychiatric ward, Diego has an institution buddy named Lila. Where is Lila? Lila's right over here. They kind of had weird flirty vibes. It's really weird. I wouldn't really pin a psychiatric ward on a meet cute place, but if that's what works for them, then that's beautiful, and I love that for them. Five visits Diego in the psych ward. He tells Diego about the Apocalypse 2.0. Diego informs Five that he wants nothing more than to save JFK from his assassination. He would also like to go back in time and kill Hitler. He has the right idea. So Five, because he knows that Diego is absolutely going to derail his plan to save the apocalypse, not save the apocalypse, to stop the apocalypse, Five informs the guards, the people working at the psych ward that Diego is planning on escaping, and then the people that work at the psych ward sedate Diego. They put him in solitary confinement in a straitjacket, and then a really weird lo-fi indie girl cover of Crazy by Gnarls Barkley plays. It's not good. I don't like the song choice, but whatever they want to do. Also, after Diego escapes solitary confinement, he meets back up with Lila, and they are escaping the psychiatric ward together. But then the Swedes show up and they try to kill them. But Diego and Lila escape unscathed because they're crazy and they're in love with each other. So moving along, Victor is staying on a farm with Sissy and Harlan, and then also Carl. Harlan's the child. Sissy and Carl are married. Sissy was the one who ran Victor over with her car when Victor arrived in Dallas. You know how love works and meet cutes happen, right? Victor also has amnesia, so they're putting out ads in the paper to look for his family. But otherwise, he's just kind of chilling out on this farm. He's a nanny for Harlan, who is nonverbal autistic. It's a nice family unit minus Carl, because he's not awful in the sense that he's like abusive and he's a wife beater, which is great. I'm glad that Sissy doesn't have to go through that. He's just bad in the sense that he's like, it's the 1960s and this is a lesbian in a heteronormative marriage and she's trapped on a farm and, she has to live a life she doesn't want to. By the way, there's some weird flirty vibes going on between Sissy and Victor. Love lesbians. Awesome. And then Klaus, the update on Klaus is that he's now a hippie cult leader. Ben is still with him, obviously. They're both really fed up with each other. They do not like each other. But they get stranded on the highway after Klaus abandoned his cult in San Francisco. He didn't really like them anymore. So they're stranded on the highway. They steal a pickup truck and then they drive to Dallas, but then they get arrested in Dallas because they stole a pickup truck. Allison's living her best life because she's married to the most handsome guy ever. His name is Raymond. He is a civil rights leader in Dallas, Texas. She is also a civil rights leader. And also she can speak again. So her vocal cords are super good now, despite only having 1960s medicine and science to figure her vocal cord stitch out. But it got all healed. It's perfect. It's fine. Finally, we have Luther. Luther fights in underground boxing rings or whatever. That's what he does at night. That's his night job. And he does this with like full monkey body out. You remember Luther has a monkey body. So this is his night job. His day job is he is employed by Jack Ruby, who, if you know your history, Jack Ruby is the mob boss. I think he's a mob boss. He's the mob boss that kills Lee Harvey Oswald after Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. Are you understand? Like, JFK is a huge part of this season, and yet we never see him. They don't cast a guy to play JFK, and I just need you to know this. Luther's main gig is that he is Jack Ruby's bodyguard, I believe. I'm not super sure. I think he is Jack Ruby's bodyguard, and then he does like boxing on the side, Jack Ruby is currently at a nightclub. It's one of those nightclubs with like half naked women with feather boas dancing on a stage, and then they're also just kind of walking around and they're half naked, but then they're wearing these glitter bodysuits. It's cute. Luther's very nice to the girls that work there, I will say. I do want to point this out. It's not plot relevant, but it's important to me that you know that Luther's very kind to the women, to the half naked women working at this club. Carl is also at the club just being a drunk man. 5 shows up at the club. He's flirting with one of the women. He's still canonically in a 12-year-old body. I know that the actor Aiden Gallagher, Jesus Christ. I know that the actor Aiden Gallagher is aging with every season because that's just how the passage of time works. Canonically, still in a 12-year-old body. I want you all to remember this, okay? 5 is at the club. He went there to go look for Luther, and he tells Luther that Apocalypse 2.0 is happening, and that they need to stop it. Luther says, go fuck yourself and figure it out yourself, which is character development for Luther, but a little bit too far in the wrong direction. But I appreciate it nonetheless. So anyways, that was episode 1. That was all of episode 1. It was just figuring out where everyone is, okay? So that was episode 1, titled Right Back Where We Started, and then episode 2 is called The Frankel Footage. So episode 2 starts with the reveal that the handler is alive. Yay! I know we're all so glad to find out that the handler is alive, even though she got shot in the fucking head by Hazel at the end of season 1. She's alive. So the handler returns to the commission, but she finds out that she was replaced by AJ Carmichael, who is a guy with a fishbowl head, and she was also demoted down to management because of her inability to deal with 5 and his meddling with the apocalypse, as well as her failure with the 743 job, which we will find out later, but just keep that in the back of your mind. So back to the present, that was the past, this is the present. 5 is appalled by Luther's sudden character growth and his individualism and his self-actualization. Do want to point out Luther isn't actually self-actualized. He's just really unmoored and lost in his life, and he doesn't really know what he's trying to do, and he doesn't really have a purpose in his life. So that's what's going on with Luther. So it's this point that 5 finds the thing that Old Man Hazel slipped into his pocket before Old Man Hazel was gunned down by the Swedes. Discovers that it is something called the frankel footage. We'll get to that in a little bit. Meanwhile, this is happening. Victor picks up Carl from the nightclub because Carl was drunk and bothering Jack Ruby. And, Luther is Jack Ruby's bodyguard, so he throws Carl out of the club. Luther sees Victor while Victor is picking up Carl because Carl left his wallet in the club and he was going outside to return it. And this is when he sees Victor picking up Carl, but then Victor also sees Luther, but because Victor has amnesia, he doesn't recognize who Luther is. So now Luther is like, holy shit, Victor is here. Because if you remember, Luther was the only one last season who was like, Victor's a threat. We need to eliminate Victor because Victor's going to cause the apocalypse. So Luther has really complicated feelings about Victor right now. Anyways, Diego and Lila, this is post breaking out of the psychiatric ward. They steal some clothes, they steal a car, and then they immediately go back to stalking Lee Harvey Oswald. Diego's plan to stop Lee Harvey Oswald from assassinating JFK is by cutting off his trigger finger. 5 finds them, brings them back to Elliot's place. While this is all happening, the cops break into Allison and Raymond's house because the night before, some white guy was being nosy. He's trying to get into the beauty parlor that Allison works at and that their civil rights meeting are being held at. This white guy tries to enter the beauty parlor. He's like, you guys are being suspicious because you're a group of black people gathered in a space, whatever. Allison kicks his ass. The white man's obviously like, this is assault, I'm gonna arrest you, whatever. He's not a cop, but he calls the cops, so the cops break into Allison and Raymond's house. They don't arrest Allison, they arrest Raymond for assault and battery, and then Allison starts rumoring the police officer, but she doesn't go through with it because if you remember, Allison has sworn off using her powers because her powers have caused bad things. Because in season 1, she was realizing for the first time in her entire life that her actions have consequences. So she doesn't rumor the police officers, and the police officers take Raymond to prison. And it is in prison where Raymond and Klaus meet because Klaus was arrested in episode 1. So Klaus and Raymond bond. It's very sweet. Do they know that they are related through Allison? No, they do not, but we're going to find that out in a little bit. Also in prison is one of Klaus's cult followers. I actually don't have him up on here. He's not really that important. The cult members have Klaus's hand tattoos because his hand tattoos say hello on one hand and then goodbye on the other hand. So they have those tattoos. And then Klaus's entire cult is built off of the lyrics of 90s pop and R&B songs, which is awesome. I think that's really slay. Anyways, all this to say, Klaus is bailed out of prison by the governor and some of his many wealthy benefactors because Klaus has wealthy benefactors. Not super sure how this happened, but he does. Klaus also has a mansion. We only find this out because he breaks into the mansion because he doesn't have a key to his own house. But he breaks into the mansion. All of the furniture is covered in sheets, but then there's also this huge ass painting above the mantelpiece, and it's Klaus in like portrait is really giving like Jesus and Buddha and Hinduism and spiritualism and all that. It's really giving like George Harrison discovering Hinduism when they went to India in 1968, I believe. When the Beatles went to India in 1968. I believe that's when they went to India. It might have been 67. Because he was married to Patty Boyd at this time, and they got married in 67. So, anyways, this doesn't matter. At the same time that Klaus is getting bailed out of prison by the governor, Allison is also at the police station trying to bail Raymond out. This is confusing. And this is something that I've pointed out several times in the Umbrella Academy. Like their continuity in terms of like at what time of day certain scenes take place and like in which sequence the the scenes are edited into. It doesn't really make any sense. There's a lot of continuity issues. This is one of them where I feel like if Allison was at the police station trying to bail Raymond out at the same time that Klaus was bailed out, they would have seen each other. Presumably, there's only one entrance and exit. Presumably, they would have seen each other, but they don't. Anyways, so they don't see each other, but Allison figures out that Klaus is in Dallas because she sees the cult member with the hand tattoos that Klaus was talking to earlier, that guy. So she puts two and two together and she's like, okay, so my brother is here and he's a cult leader. So Five had given Elliot the frankel footage to develop, and then he went to go pick up Diego and Lila. And then when they went back to Elliot's place, Elliot had already developed the frankel footage. He's pointing a rifle at them and he's accusing them of being communists and enemy of the people, because the frankel footage includes the teacher from iCarly, Mindy Sterling. I think her name is Mindy Sterling. It is Mindy Sterling. I have it written in my notes. Mindy Sterling, who plays Miss Briggs in iCarly, on the day that JFK is assassinated, and it is literally footage of JFK getting assassinated. That's what the frankel footage is. But also the important bit about the frankel footage is that they see Daddy Reginald Hargreaves on the grassy knoll, standing ominously, standing suspiciously at the scene of the crime. So Diego, who is obsessed with saving JFK from his own assassination, immediately puts two and two together and he's like, oh my God, Reginald assassinated JFK, or at least he was part of the plot to assassinate JFK. So Diego and Five decide to go looking for Reginald and proof of his dastardly deeds. Before they do that, Lila and Diego establish their weird flirty vibes. They're in love. So Luther knows where Victor is staying. Luther knows where the farm is because Luther still has Carl's wallet from when Carl was pissed drunk at the club the night before. So Luther goes to the farm to go look for Victor. He brings a gun to confront Victor, but then he just ends up apologizing to Victor for being a bad brother, which is awesome for me. Doesn't really make a lot of sense for Victor, because if you recall, Victor has amnesia. Luther doesn't know this, obviously, but Victor's 100% confused. Anyways, the only outcome of this is that Sissy shows up and she points a gun at Luther because she's like, why are you, a strange man, on my farm intimidating my son and secret lover? They're not lovers at this point, but they have insane flirty vibes. They're gonna become lovers soon. Just wait a minute. Luther returns Carl's wallet to Sissy and then he leaves, and then Sissy tells Victor to avoid Luther because Luther apologized, and men like that never apologize to women for the crimes that they've committed against women. And this is an automatic red flag. And then later that night, Sissy reads Victor's palms and they're flirting and it's beautiful and it's incredibly homoerotic. I love it so much. But then Victor leaves in the middle of the night, just steals Sissy's car and leaves. Okay, so back to Five and Diego. They arrive at Reginald's business company, the umbrella manufacturing company building place. You know what I'm talking about. They arrive at the place, they find out it's a front. It's not a real office. It's some sort of weird lab thing. I don't really know. But the two of them separately get the shit beaten out of them. Five gets beaten up by a baby Pogo. Do you remember Pogo, the talking monkey butler from season 1? I don't have him on the board right now because he's simply inconsequential in this season. He only shows up once. He doesn't show up again. So Five gets beaten up by baby Pogo. Diego gets beaten up by Daddy Reginald over here, who is significantly younger. Diego gets shanked by Reginald, left to die. Awesome. The important thing that you need to know about this bit is that Five finds an invitation addressed to Reginald for a gala at the Mexican consulate, so now they know where he's going to be. Episode 3 is called The Swedish Job. We get a flashback to 1960, very soon after Klaus and Ben arrive in Dallas. Klaus is homeless, he's disgusting, but he's also incredibly charming and off-putting, and he's so charming and off-putting that he convinces a rich elderly lady to be his patron. So this is how Klaus gets his wealth. This is how he's able to afford a mansion. This is how he has all of these wealthy benefactors, such as the governor. It's because he was performing magic tricks for this wealthy patron old lady and all of her wealthy patron old people friends, so he has money, he has connections, he's great. And then by 1961, Klaus and Ben are hopping around the world. This is the beginning of Klaus's cult, which is called Destiny's Child. And Ben develops a crush on one of Klaus's disciples. Her name is, what is her name? I didn't write her name down, but she comes up later, so you'll learn her name then. But Ben develops a crush on one of Klaus's disciples. In 1962, they are in India. Klaus is a full-fledged cult leader, and he's starting to really dislike the whole cult life because they are clingy and they're pushy, and he just doesn't like all of the touching that is involved with being Jesus. So by 1963, there in San Francisco, Klaus hates being a cult leader. He runs away. This is where we caught up with him in episode 1. Back in the present, Diego survives getting shanked by Reginald. He is not healed, but he's patched up by Lila, and then they immediately have sex in Elliot's bed. Awesome. This is also when she reveals to Diego that she has insane abandonment issues because when she was 4 years old, she discovered her parents murdered in their living room. So this is awesome backstory for her. And then Victor, you remember how Victor ran away from Sissy's farm in the middle of the night after they had their weird homoerotic moment where Sissy was reading Victor's palms? Yeah, so while Victor is running away in the middle of the night, he comes across the Swedes who were looking for him. Let's be clear. The Swedes were looking for him. And they try to gun Victor down. Victor crashes his car and then he immediately runs to go hide in a cornfield. But then the Swedes find him, so then he blows up the cornfield with his powers. The Swedes are fine, by the way. Victor's also fine. Like, all of the Swedes make it out of this alive. Not sure how, but they do. Everyone's fine. Because of Victor using his powers to create a crop circle in the middle of Texas farmland, Five is able to find Victor's location. They have a reunion. It's very sweet. Victor is incredibly bewildered by everything that's going on because Five isn't very good at explaining things. Five tells Victor that there's an apocalypse happening. He doesn't really say anything else about that. Also, he does not tell Victor that Victor was the cause of the first apocalypse, probably because he doesn't want a repeat of that. Makes sense. I also would kind of keep that information on the down low until I knew that my emotionally volatile and powerful sibling was a little bit calmer, more level-headed, could handle it. Allison goes to Klaus's mansion. How she knew where his mansion was, I'm not super sure, but they reunite. They're in the pool. It's filthy. It has not been cleaned in ages, but it's very sweet. And then after they reunite, Allison goes back to her civil rights group in the beauty parlor, and she convinces the group to continue with their sit-in because they were planning on having a sit-in in one of the white-only diners because they wanted to. It's the whole thing where it's like, we deserve to be here too. Like, this space should be a communal space. It should not be segregated by race. Like, we deserve to be treated as people in this space that you have designated whites only because that is arbitrary and stupid and we deserve to be respected. But the rest of the civil rights group is like, no, we shouldn't do it because Raymond is still in prison. And it's like, girl, just do the sit-in? Allison gives a rousing speech and she convinces the civil rights group to continue with the sit-in. Also, while this is happening, Klaus and Ben use Ben's ghost powers, or just the fact that Ben is a ghost, to scare the shit out of the prison guards, and then they release Raymond. So Raymond is out of jail now. Awesome. The handler arrives in Dallas. That'll come up later. Luther asks his boss, Jack Ruby, to track down Allison because he's still in love with Allison. He wants to find her address. Jack Ruby gives Luther Allison's exact address, and then he goes over to her house. He is arriving at Allison's house at the same time that Raymond is arriving back at the house from being in prison. And this is when Luther discovers that Allison is 1, married, 2, has been married for a year, 3, married to an awesome guy. So this is really bad for Luther. He's still really in his feels about this because he's still kind of in love with Allison because we're still doing the whole like weird, incestuous, non-biological sibling thing going on. Also, this is really weird for Raymond because Raymond is finding out that Allison has 2 previously unknown white brothers in the span of like an hour. So lots of questions are turning in his head, the gears are spinning, answers are not being had. Klaus, let's go back to Klaus now. Klaus goes to a hardware store and finds 18-year-old Dave. Do you remember Dave, Klaus's lover, boyfriend, soulmate that he met during the Vietnam War and whom died in the Vietnam War? Dave is a minor. He's not a minor, he's 18. He's barely legal because this is 10 years before Dave and Klaus met in the Vietnam War. I cannot tell you how much I hate this plotline so much. It's not necessarily the plotline that I hate because the whole purpose of this is that Klaus is trying to prevent Dave from enlisting in the Vietnam War because he does not want Dave to die. Like, this is the whole thing. He doesn't want Dave to die, even if that ultimately means that in the future they don't end up meeting. Klaus does not want Dave to die in the Vietnam War, so he's going to this hardware store where Dave works at, and he's like, hey, babe, don't go to the war. Except that Dave is 18 years old. Like, they didn't give us an exact age for Dave in season 1, which is fine. We don't need to do that, but they didn't need to make him 18 years old in this, you know? I just think this is weird. I think it's kind of icky. I think it's kind of gross, but whatever. It's so fucked up. I miss Dave. Why couldn't we just get the original actor? And this is no hate to this guy who plays 18-year-old Dave. No hate to him. He did great for what he was given. It's just so stupid. You know how Allison convinced the civil rights group to do the lunch counter sit-in because everything was going to go fine even without Raymond? Yeah, so it goes to shit. They're being yelled at, they're being harassed, very uncomfy to watch. I really can't imagine what it was like to film that scene. I would have anger in my soul and in my heart. Raymond arrives. He's kind of pissed off at Allison because remember, he's learning today that Allison has two previously unmentioned white brothers that he didn't know about, and presumably there are more secrets that Allison hasn't told Raymond. So they're in a little tiff, okay? They're a little fighting right now. The lunch counter sit-in escalates. There's a full-on riot that goes on. The police show up. There's police brutality happening. Raymond gets arrested again, but Allison rumors the police officer to stop beating Raymond with his police baton, and she rumors the police officer to let him go. This is bad. Obviously, it's good that Raymond is no longer getting beaten up by a police officer, but it's bad because Allison is revealing that not only does she have two white brothers, she also has superpowers. Raymond doesn't really take this as, oh my god, my wife has superpowers. He takes this as, my wife, who's a black woman, just told a white police officer to go away, and the police officer did. This is unheard of for black people. Black people don't just tell white people to do something and the white people listen. Like, there's something going on, and Allison is not who she says, so their marriage is dissolving. It's not good because she was keeping way too many secrets from him, and now they're all coming out in the open at the exact same time. It's a really stressful time for the two of them. Meanwhile, all of this is happening. Five and Victor watch one of Luther's boxing matches. He's supposed to win the match. He doesn't. He fully crashes out because he's spiraling about the fact that Allison has been happily married to a wonderful, amazing guy for a year or so. Also, while all of this is happening, Diego and Lila, where are they? They're right over here. Diego and Lila have just finished having sex. Lila leaves the apartment in the middle of the night. She goes to a hotel where the handler is, and it is revealed that Lila is the handler's daughter. Episode 4 is called The Majestic 12. We start with a flashback to 1993 London. Lila's parents are murdered. They are assassinated by some guy that we don't know yet. But the whole point of this flashback is to see that the handler was there at the scene of the crime. And this is when she adopts 4-year-old Lila, and she thus takes her to the commission, and she raises her to be a spy, an assassin. I'm not super sure what the sitch is going on there, but it's basically just like an Umbrella Academy situation, except that Lila does not have any siblings. She's also in a place that is completely separated from time and space entirely, so I don't know how old Lila is. I'm assuming she's roughly the same age as the rest of the siblings, but also the rest of the siblings are no longer the same age anymore due to the finicky thing called time travel. So I don't really know. Anyways, in the present, the handler commissions Lila to protect Five at all costs, which is really confusing because the handler wants nothing more than to see Five die. So the next morning, post crashing out at the boxing match, Luther tells Victor that Victor was the cause of the first apocalypse in 2019. And Luther isn't telling Victor this to be a dick, but because Victor explicitly asked. He's like, Five is keeping a secret from me. I want to know. Tell me what the fuck happened. So Luther does. Luther also gets fired by Jack Ruby for throwing the boxing match because he was supposed to win. So now he no longer has a job. Five updates Diego and Lila on what's up with Luther and Victor. And Five and Lila do not like each other. Just want to put this out there. They don't really like each other. Something happens in between that last note and this one. I didn't write it down, which is my fault. I think they're talking about the Mexican consulate at this point, but basically, Elliot tells Diego, Lila, and Five that the Majestic 12 are members of a shadow government. They are a secret committee of scientists, military, deep state personnel. The show implies that the Majestic 12 are the ones who coordinated the assassination of JFK. 11 of the members of the Majestic 12 have been identified, we know who their identities are. It's only the 12th member who has been unidentified, but the gang believes that the 12th secret member of the Majestic 12 is Reginald. So they decide, okay, we need to figure out what the Majestic 12 are cooking up. We need to uncover their scheme, their dastardly plot. So they all agree, and by all, I mean Diego, Lila, and Five, they agree to go to the Mexican consulate to sort of dig up some information and also maybe to find Reginald. Victor returns to the farm because he is in love with Sissy, and he tells Sissy that there are assassins after him and that he's not safe and that he has to leave the farm. Sissy offers to run away with him with Harlan because they are lesbians and they're in love and they just want to. The battery died in the middle of a sentence. I don't know which sentence I was saying. Harlan hears all of this. Harlan hears the entire conversation that Victor and Sissy are having with each other. So he runs away and he runs directly towards the lake. And I guess he falls into the lake because when Victor finds him, he is fully at the bottom of the lake. Victor uses his powers to push the water away, like Moses with the Red Sea. And Harlan is dead. Harlan fully drowned. So Victor resuscitates him, uses mouth to mouth, does the whole chest compressions thing. While Victor is doing mouth to mouth, we see some weird glowy particles go from Victor into Harlan, and then Harlan is revived and he's alive again. Klaus stalks 18-year-old Dave, tries to convince him not to enlist in the Vietnam War by telling him all about the future. Then Dave's uncle calls Klaus a queer, and Dave punches Klaus in the fave on the behest of his redneck uncle. So this is not good for Klaus, and he ends up relapsing, except the cult finds him in the mansion, so it's really not going good well for him. Allison finds Raymond at the beauty parlor. They are having a civil rights meeting that she was not invited to, so she's pissed off. He accuses her of being bought by the US government to infiltrate their community. I think he's kind of right for this because, again, she's been keeping a lot of secrets from him, and all of these secrets are coming up right now. So Allison leaves. She's kind of kicked out of the group at that point because they're all on Raymond's side. And honestly, she has been being a little shady. Finds Luther at a barbecue joint in the black community. It's in the black side of town. There's only black people at this barbecue joint because Luther is an ally and he also knows where the good food is. Five, Diego and Lila sneak into the gala at the Mexican consulate. Diego knows that Lila left the night before after they had sex. He kind of accuses her of doing something dastardly, but she's like, what the fuck would I do? I was getting more medical supplies to make sure that you don't die, idiot. So then they dance on the dance floor and they're eye fucking in the middle of the dance floor and they're in love and it's really gross but also really cute and really sexy. Also Grace is there, except it's not robot mom Grace. It is Grace in the 1960s who is a Texan scientist and she is a real person and she's dating Reginald. Weird and gross and disgusting. Diego's also disgusted by this fact, by the idea that his mom and dad are dating, because he likes Grace. He does not like Reginald. While they're at the Mexican consulate, they get attacked by the Swedes in a very cool hallway fight. It gets really bad because instead of choosing to help Diego fight off the Swedes, she instead helps Five fight off the Swedes. Because if you remember, the handler commissioned Lila to protect Five at all costs. So now something fishy is going on here, and Diego is not going to be thrilled about this, let me tell you. Also, for the Swedes attack, Five also did find the Majestic 12 and he did listen in on a bit of their conversation. It's not really important. The main thing is that they find Reginald, and before Reginald leaves the Mexican consulate, Five shouts ancient Greek at him. He shouts, I think, like the first couple lines of the Odyssey in the original ancient Greek, and this is just kind of to confirm that Reginald is Reginald, you know? While all of this is happening, Luther gets kicked out of his apartment because he no longer has any money, kind of homeless, but he goes over to Elliot's apartment. They hang out, they get high on laughing gas, they're best friends now. Okay, while this is happening, after Harlan is checked out by the doctor after his near death experience, because he did die and then was revived by Victor's powers, Sissy and Victor make out in the living room and then they have sex. And it's beautiful because Victor makes Sissy feel alive again and he shows her how trapped she has been with Carl. And it's really beautiful. That's how episode 4 ends. Episode 5, Valhalla, begins with a flashback to 1962. Human, real person, scientist Grace. She is a scientist doing monkey intelligent experiments on baby Pogo. Reginald is also a scientist slash benefactor. I don't know what he is. I don't know what he does. I have never known. I will never know. They are in a relationship and they are raising Pogo as their child. And he is honestly a better father to Pogo than he ever was to like the actual human children that he adopted and used as experiments. Anyways, they send Pogo to space at some point, but then the mission goes wrong. Like the ship blows up, but Pogo's fine, except that he's not really fine because he's like actively dying. So they inject baby Pogo with a serum that humanizes him. I think this is how he learns how to talk and how he becomes like old man talking monkey butler Pogo. They're really trying this season to make me believe that Reginald loved Grace, which is why he built a robot nanny in her exact image. But it's weird. It's so weird. But they're really doing something with the whole Grace and Reginald thing, and I'm not sure if it's super successful, but it's interesting and I don't like it, and I just wanted to point that out. Actually, do I like it? I think it's interesting, and I think it adds color to Reginald as a character. He's still a bad person. Let's be weird, but it adds really weird dimension to him that I don't know if it was necessary, but it's interesting nonetheless. Back in the present, Five, Diego, and Lila leave the gala at the Mexican consulate. Five thinks Lila is sus because she's too good at self defense and he threatens to kill her. Diego is also a little sussed out by her because she saved Five in the hallway fight instead of saving Diego, so they kind of break up. Lila goes back to the handler, bringing her one of Diego's knives. Apparently, this was like a big part of that particular mission, like give me one of Diego's knives for some thing that I'm not going to tell you about. This is also when the handler reveals to Lila and to the audience by proxy that their mission in the 1960s is an unsanctioned mission by the commission, so they are not supposed to be there. They decide to sick the Swedes on Diego and Diego only. So they send the Swedes fake coordinates to a location that's like, hey, come and get me. And it's at this false secondary location that a trap blows up and kills one of the brothers. It's the little one that gets blown up. So RIP to the little one. He's dead. Can you even see that? It's so little. But the little Swede is dead. So now there's only 2 Swedes. Meanwhile, post relapse, post rediscovering the cult, post everything, post Dave, Klaus wakes up hungover, still kind of drunk and half naked on Allison's kitchen floor. They lament about their failing love lives, and Klaus makes a comment about Dave, and Allison doesn't catch the comment, but Allison kind of acts like she has no idea what Klaus is talking about. So is Diego the only one that knows about Dave? Wait, did he mention No, wait. Diego does know about Dave because they went to the Vietnam bar together, right? Or was that in they do. Diego does know about I couldn't remember. Sissy and Victor are hanging out together after an awesome night of sex, lesbian sex. They're in love. Unfortunately, this beautiful moment between the two of them is cut short because Carl comes back home. He was on like a business trip. He's back now. Okay, so Five, Diego, and Luther are in Elliot's apartment. They are chatting about Reginald and they are chatting over Luther's giant skillet of scrambled eggs. It's truly like he cracked 20 eggs into a single skillet and then he scrambled all of the eggs simultaneously. And this shouldn't work because the skillet is a normal skillet and that certainly will not scramble 20 eggs simultaneously. It's really funny and I don't really understand the physics of this, but like I don't care and Luther seems happy with his 20 scrambled eggs, so it's okay. But basically the three of them are chatting about Reginald and they're like, okay, so we need to find him, but like we don't know how to find him and none of us have seen him in all of the time that we've been in Dallas. And Luther's like, actually I did see him. And Vibe and Diego are like, OMG, wait, what? Spill, tell us everything you know. So, flashback to around the time that Luther arrived in Dallas, he went searching for Reginald because he figured that if he found Reginald and told Reginald that he was his adopted son from the future, then everything would work out and he would be able to figure out what to do with his life and he would find a purpose in his life again, right? So he gets on a bus from Dallas to whatever undisclosed city the Umbrella Academy mansion is located, and he finds Reginald, except for the fact that Reggie is throwing a very cool, super hip, super suave, very 70s, not 70s, very 60s party in the mansion. And Luther finds him and he's like, hey, Dad, I'm your adopted son from the future. And Reginald is like, no, you're not. He basically calls him a failure, he disowns him, and then he kicks him out of the party. And that was what happened when Luther saw Reginald for the first and only time in the 60s. They still decide that they do need to go talk to Reginald because surely he knows something about something. Elliot has the brilliant idea of why don't we just time travel out of the 60s? Because he doesn't know that Five is actually really bad at time traveling. And then Five has the brilliant idea of getting the gang back together, which, hey, we've thought about this before, but it didn't work out. But I'm glad that we're really moving on that plan in episode 5. This should have happened earlier, but whatever. So we get the gang all back together. Victor apologizes to Diego specifically because Diego likes to hold a grudge. If Allison and Klaus show up drunk, very awesome, very cool of them. The reunion between the 7 of them, 6 if you consider the fact that Ben is a ghost, so he's not actually reuniting. The reunion is very dramatic. The music swells, the light goes very like soft and dreamy or whatever. It's very also Klaus is lying to everyone about the fact that Ben hadn't time traveled with them because if you recall, they're fighting. They are in their flop era. So Diego and Five update the team on Reginald's involvement with the Kennedy assassination and the connection to the upcoming apocalypse. Victor has the genius idea that maybe the reason the apocalypse followed them to the 60s is because they happen to be in the 60s and their mere presence in the 60s is screwing up with the timeline. So then they all start pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other. If they're like, Klaus started a cult and Luther works with Jack Ruby and Diego tried to stalk Lee Harvey Oswald and all this shit. They're like, okay, all of this, the apocalypse was happening because you did this thing differently than it was originally. But ultimately, what we need to remember is that everything goes back to JFK. I love that JFK's assassination is a pivotal moment in the timeline. It's really beautiful. Anyways, the point of them pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other for changing the timeline is so that Five can get really somber and tell them that he witnessed them all die in Apocalypse 2.0 and that they need to band together to stop nuclear warfare. But Luther, who, if you remember, has gone through a moment of actualization and self realization during his time in the 60s, aka just being completely unmoored and having no purpose in life whatsoever. Luther bails because he's very anti Reginald and he's very anti saving the world, which is what Reginald wanted for them. That's what he raised them to do. They are weapons against the apocalypse, they always have been. Also, Luther doesn't want to ask Reggie for help, but Five does because Five is like, he knows something. Obviously, he knows something. So Luther leaves, Diego follows him. They have a conversation about their respective daddy issues. Luther is insecure specifically about his significance in the world or his insignificance in the world in the grand scheme of things because the last time he had self esteem, he caused Victor to kickstart the apocalypse. I would also lose any self respect and self esteem that I had if I was the spark which lit the bomb which caused the apocalypse. Like, yeah, I would also not feel great about myself. Diego's whole daddy issues thing that's really important this season is that he wants to save JFK from being assassinated because Reginald told them their entire lives that they're heroes. And Diego believes he's a hero. Obviously, we know this. He stalked Lee Harvey Oswald in order to save JFK, and then he was also moonlighting as a vigilante all of season one. Ugh, I miss season one Diego. Like, there's nothing wrong with season two Diego, but season one Diego just hits so good. And Diego now is just not hitting so good. It really is just the like it's the caveman like psych ward look. It's not hitting for me. I do not like it. Ugh. All that to say, the entire time that Luther and Diego are walking and talking about their daddy issues, Reginald's skeletal looking chauffeur hands them an invitation from Reginald for a late supper. So now they have a date with daddy. Meanwhile, Allison, Klaus, and Victor decide to hang out. They get tacos, and then they have a dance party in Allison's hair salon, the one that she works at. They're all high, and then they're also maybe drunk. They're high or drunk. I don't think they're both. Klaus might be both. He might be crossed, but they're definitely intoxicated. They also have an argument about the Luther Allison relationship, and then they discuss the Victor Leonard relationship, even though Victor certainly does not remember that relationship, because remember, he has amnesia. And then they decide that the healthiest relationship any of the siblings have ever been with was when Five was married to Dolores. Do you remember Dolores? The mannequin from season one that Five found in the first apocalypse that he got stuck in when he was 12 years old. And then he just like superimposed a personality upon this mannequin so that he wouldn't be so lonely because he was so desperately lonely in the apocalypse. Do you remember that? Yeah. So that was the healthiest relationship any of these siblings have ever been in. Now that all of his siblings have left, Five is alone, but then Lila lures him away from Elliot's apartment to an abandoned warehouse and they fight to a god awful cover of Elliot's. Not Billy Elliot. They fight to a god awful cover of Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. The handler is also there too. That's going to be important later. Victor, after having a little dance party and getting drunk with Allison and Klaus, Victor goes back to the farm and he confesses his love to Sissy. Except this is a really bad time because Sissy has just finished having sex with Carl. Not because Sissy loves Carl, because they are legally husband and wife, and it is the wife's quote unquote obligation to have sex with her husband. Awesome. Victor tries to convince Sissy to leave Carl and run away with him. Also, take Harlan. We can run away together, and then Harlan can also be with us and not with your shit husband. Sissy is dealing with a lot of stuff. It's just like general 1960s misogyny. And Victor, God love Victor. Victor's so 21st century in his politics. Like, he does not understand, especially, oh my God, especially Southern politics versus Northern politics. Oh my God. He's so of his time. It's unbelievable. And then simultaneously, while this is happening, Klaus also decides to confront his cult, and Allison decides to tell Raymond everything. Like, she decides to tell him the truth about herself. And while this is all happening, a Swedish version of Adele's Hello is playing because the Swedes, the two remaining Swedes, are having a Viking funeral for their third brother. Okay, so episode 6, A Light Supper, begins with a flashback of Allison landing in Dallas, 1960s for the first time. It's immediately bad for her. First of all, she's a black woman. She has no voice. It's really not good for her. She's experiencing 1960s racism, 1960s sexism, and she runs into the black-owned women's barber shop. But she ends up running into the barber shop because she's being chased down by three white men who surely are planning on doing horrible things to her. So she meets Raymond because even then they were holding the civil rights meetings in the barber shop. They are married within a year or something, and then she also fully recovers her voice despite the lack of alien medicine, because surely there was some alien medicine going on in the academy, you know? So back in the present, Allison tells Raymond the whole truth about, being from 2019 and having powers and being supernatural and all that stuff. And Raymond is mostly amazed by Obama. He's obsessed with the fact that Obama became president. And if you know that racism ended when Obama was elected into office in 2008. To prove that she has superpowers, Allison takes Raymond on a shopping spree in the whites only center of downtown Dallas. Then she also takes revenge on the diner owner where the lunch counter sit in took place, and she causes him to get third-degree burned. That's not super good. Obviously, he has the truth from her now. That's super chill. But then, like any other normal person, Ray becomes suspicious that maybe Allison used her powers to make him fall in love with her. And I'm gonna be really real for a second. Totally right for this. If my wife was like, I have superpowers, I'd be like, oh my god, maybe my wife with the ability to tell people what to do, rumor them to do what she wants them to do. Maybe she used her powers to make me fall in love with her. And honestly, I don't think she told Raymond about Patrick, but she's done it before. She told Patrick, I heard a rumor that you loved me. Look, I think he's right to be cautious and wary. Maybe she used her powers to get what she wanted out of him. Obviously, she did it, but I think he's in the right to question this. Okay, so last episode, Lila and Five were fighting in the warehouse. Also, the handler was there. The whole reason this happened is because the handler wanted to strike a deal with Five, and the deal is that if Five assassinates the board of directors, she will give Five a way to get his entire family back to the correct timeline, sans apocalypse. So they can go back to 2019 and there will be no apocalypse. Apocalypse canceled, right? Five doesn't take this deal because he doesn't like her, so he leaves, but that's okay because she has more plans. She also plans on hiring the two remaining Swedes to assassinate Diego because if you recall last episode when the third Swede was blown up, I don't think I mentioned this, but when the third Swede was blown up, the only evidence of someone planting that trap was one of Diego's knives. One of Diego's knives was at the scene of the crime. And if you remember, the handler got one of Diego's knives because Lila brought it back from the Mexican consulate. So she's planning on framing Diego for the third Swede brother's murder. Yeah, I'm not super sure why. I think it is just because Lila is in love with Diego and love is a weakness and we can't have that, so we do have to eliminate the source of her weakness. Also because Diego is Five's brother and Five is literally doing everything in his power to save his family. But that's my assumption and the show isn't really interested in confirming or denying. So all of the siblings are getting invitations to this light supper with Reginald. Diego and Victor are very pro meeting Reginald for a light supper. And this is the birth of Team Zero, in which none of them have numbers and there are no hierarchies, and they're all very helpful to each other, and they love each other and they care for each other, and there is no number one or two. They are just Team Zero. Anyway, so they're very pro meeting Reginald for a light supper. Luther is very anti meeting Reginald for a light supper because if you recall, he is suddenly very emotionally intelligent and totally aware of Reginald's manipulation tactics. Meanwhile, while those three are arguing, Klaus tells his cult that he is a fraud, that he's a liar, he's a thief. They should not be listening to him. He does not deserve their devotion or their love because he's a fraud. Like he's not an actual spiritual leader, he's just some dude. But then the cult takes this as a Lisan al Gaib moment. You know how in like Dune Part 2, the movie, or also if you just read the book Dune by Frank Herbert, where Timothy Chalamet's character, Paul Atreides, is like, I am not the Messiah, I am not the Lisan al Gaib, like I'm not the guy that your prophets have been talking about. And then every single thing that he does, the Fremen people are like, Lisan al Gaib. You know that one gif of Javier Bardem in the Dune Part 2 movie where he's so humble he denies that he's the Lisan al Gaib, but that's exactly the reason why he is the Lisan al Gaib. It's very funny. Anyways, this is basically what the cult is doing with Klaus. He's like, I'm a fraud, and they're like, Lisa Gaib, we're all frauds, you know? Also, I'm sure you remember this, but Klaus and Ben are mortal enemies right now. They are totally in their flop era, and they discover that Ben can possess Klaus. They discover this on accident, but then this becomes a little like, ooh, we could do a lot with this. Or Ben's like, ooh, we can do a lot with this. Klaus is very anti getting possessed by Ben. Also, at the same time, Dave visits. He's at the cult mansion because Klaus was being super weird about the Vietnam War. And he's like, you're a liar. Like, you're just trying to get me to join your cult. Like, there's no way you know anything about me. Like, you're making all of this shit up. Like, I'm not. How do you even know that I'm going into the Vietnam War? Like, how do you know? So, Klaus proves that he knows Dave by telling him a bunch of his favorites. And his favorite book is Dune. Anyways, Klaus also tells Dave that the reason Dave joined the military initially, like in the original timeline, is because he thought he could prove something to himself and his family, aka that he's heterosexual. Because I guess Dave knows at this point that he is a homo. In like one last act of desperation to get Dave to not enlist in the Vietnam War, Klaus tells Dave the exact date and location of his death, as well as he shows Dave his dog tags because he's still wearing Dave's dog tags because he's in love. And he tells him all this because he's trying to prove something, but then Dave is like, well, even if this is true, it doesn't fucking matter because I already enlisted. And then Klaus is white, but it's early. You're not supposed to enlist until, you know, JFK's assassination. He doesn't say that JFK is getting assassinated, but he's like, you're not supposed to, you still have a couple of days. And Dave is like, yeah, well, after I punched you in the diner, my uncle made me enlist. Like, I have to go to war now. And Klaus is like, fuck, I made it worse. It's really bad. Oh my god. Like, okay, part of me does like this subplot because I'm like, oh my god, tragic gay lovers. Like, he did everything that he could to save Dave and stop him from dying, but also the way he did it was just so fucked up. Also, Dave is 18 for some reason, and Klaus is in his early to mid 30s. This is not a great age gap, even if like it's not awesome, but it's also not terrible given like how complex and how fucked up like the timeline shit makes everything. It's weird, but this is kind of the conclusion to that plot line, so we can just mention that and move on. Anyways, it's dinner time with Daddy Reginald at the Tiki Lounge. The siblings immediately start bickering with each other, which does not bode well for this light supper that they're going to have with Reginald. But then Reginald arrives and the dinner immediately goes to shit because they do a demonstration of their powers. Not great. And then Diego accuses Reginald of murdering or planning to murder JFK, and Reginald takes him down several notches by psychoanalyzing his trauma and calling him some has been hero who thinks that he's a hero but never actually was, and he's just trying to live up to like an impossible standard that he will never be and never had the potential to be. It's awesome. It's not awesome, but you know. Diego stutters because the writers kind of forgot that he has a stutter, but then they sometimes they remember, but then most of the time they forget. Like they're very bad at remembering that Diego has a stutter, but I remember. I remember all the time. The dinner only gets worse because Ben tries to possess Klaus unsuccessfully. Again, they haven't practiced this for realsies. Like Ben is just trying things, you know? Luther also unearths his monkey body because he has unresolved daddy issues. Reginald leaves, but he insists on talking to Five alone because Five is the only reasonable one, I guess. And this dinner lasted less than 5 minutes. While talking to Five individually, he advises Five to rein in the time traveling. Five has been trying to time travel by days, weeks, decades, even when he should really start by time traveling through seconds. Five is like, that's fucking stupid, but whatever. But it's a very pleasant scene. It's very calm, kind of weird that it's so pleasant and Reginald's in it. They're just two old men drinking cognac together, and it's honestly kind of chill. kind of into it. I think that these two are very interesting because they are very similar in their attitudes, in their leadership styles, just in kind of the general way that they move through the world, very forceful, very commanding. I think that's interesting. I think this is a very interesting dynamic that will not be explored again, or actually never will be explored. So the siblings -5 are leaving the tiki lounge. Sissy shows up so that she can talk to Victor. They talk about the dangers of lesbianism in 1960s Texas. And Victor's like, we can go anywhere, like we can go anywhere and we would be safe. But then he doesn't name any cities. Like Sissy's like, where can we go? And Victor's like, I don't know, but we can just go. And I'm like, girl, I know it's the 60s and obviously being gay isn't super awesome anywhere you go, but if you go to San Francisco, it'll be so chill. If you go to New York, oh my god. I don't think the ballroom scene was up and running at this time, but there's definitely gay people over there. Like you could go to I think if you went to any major metropolis, you'd be fine, you know? So, anyways, they agree to run away together and then they start making out. But Carl followed Sissy and he really creepily watches them make out in the car. So now he knows that there's an affair going on and that his wife is a lesbo. Okay, and then Diego tells Grace because Grace was just kind of waiting in the car for Reginald. He tells Grace that Reginald is planning on assassinating JFK. The Swedes break into Elliot's apartment and they murder him, not because he is necessarily important to what they're doing, but because they know that Elliot is affiliated with Diego. And if you recall, the handler sent them to assassinate Diego. So Elliot's kind of just like a casualty in their quest to murder Diego. It's very bad. It's very awful. I'm very sorry, Elliot. Rest in peace. Diego and Luther return to the apartment to discover his mutilated body. Super not cool. And Five makes that deal with the handler. So things are gonna go really well. Okay, episode 7, Olga Faroga. We are in Wisconsin, 1982. Five murders the board of directors. He is my favorite assassin, except for the fact that he immediately after delivering AJ Carmichael's fish head, or just like the fish portion of AJ's body to the handler. Five denounces the assassin career. He's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I do not want to kill people anymore. So, in exchange for assassinating the board of directors, the handler gives Five a briefcase that will automatically time travel in the next 90 minutes with or without the Hargreaves. So, that's a bummer. Also, the handler's storyline for this episode is that she retakes the commission and no one is happy about it. Also, Lila is named the head of security, which is a bad idea. Also, insane nepotism because surely she's not capable of this. She's not qualified for this. Here's what's happening in the 90-minute window of time before the briefcase travels back to 2019 with or without the Hargreaves. So Ben is trying to unconsensually possess Klaus's body by basically sleep depriving him. Klaus is like, I will stay awake. You will not possess my body. And Ben is like, you are human and you're alive. You have to sleep at some point. And when you do sleep, I will possess your body. And then they have this heart to heart chat about feeling helpless because Klaus feels helpless about the fact that he can't save Dave. And Ben is like, I feel helpless every single day of your life watching you do the worst things possible, literally towing the line between life and death. So they strike a deal in which Ben can possess Klaus's body for like a few minutes or something just to like experience fresh air again or something, except for that Ben ends up staying in Klaus's body for a lot longer. So while he's in Klaus's body, he's like feeling the dirt, he's tasting fruit, he's smelling the fresh air, and then he's also flirting with Jill, who is his crush. That is a cult member. Her name is Jill. They start flirting. They're sitting in a patch of dirt, by the way, while this is happening, but they're flirting. It's very cute, a little weird. Ben asked to smell her hair. Do want to point out that she is a black woman. Is this a microaggression? Not super sure. And then I think they start making out. They do. I have a memory of this. And then Jill suggests that they have public sex on that patch of dirt. And Ben is like, hold up for a second, hold up for a second. I do want to take this a little bit slow because I'm technically still 17. Also, I have not had my first kiss and I'm a virgin. But then Jill is like, but we had sex like last week. And then Ben is like, huh? Because apparently Jill and Klaus have had sex before. They did a threesome with the other cult member that was in jail with Klaus at the beginning of the season. And also they had this threesome on a sex swing. Awesome. Ben is pissed about that. But Ben doesn't really have time to be pissed because Diego shows up to take Klaus and by proxy Ben to the alleyway behind Elliot's apartment so that they can all time travel back to 2019. Ben tells Diego that he's possessing Klaus's body. Like Diego is talking to Klaus's face, but he's actually talking to Ben. So they hug, they reunite. It's very beautiful. It's very sad. They're very happy to find out that their dead brother is still with them spiritually, like in a genuinely spiritual way. And then Diego tasks Ben with keeping possession of Klaus's body for longer than the original deal to ensure that Klaus's body gets to the rendezvous point. So Ben and Klaus go to the rendezvous point and then Diego leaves to go bury Elliot. While he is burying Elliot, Lila shows up. They drink together. She's technically drugging him because she plans on kidnapping him. And the reason that she's kidnapping him is because she wants to take him to the commission and make him work for the commission because she's in love with him. Okay, I ordered this so weirdly. Jesus Christ. Okay, before that happens, before Diego goes to get Klaus, Carl is threatening Victor because Victor is having sex with his wife, truthfully. Like, two lesbians are living under his roof, and he's not very happy about this because homosexuality is an illness, it is a sin. Carl gives Victor an ultimatum. Victor either leaves the farm, like he disappears, he does not contact them again, like he fully just leaves their lives, or Harlan gets sent to a mental asylum. Yikes. Five finds Victor and tells him that they have to go, like they gotta go right now, or else they're never gonna get another chance to get back to the correct timeline. Victor is like, well, I have to take Sissy and Harlan. Like, they can't stay here. I wanna take them. And also, like, if we take them back to the future, Harlan can get help for whatever it is that he has. They refuse to say autism in this show. I don't know if it suddenly just became like a slur, like if autism became a slur and I didn't know that it became a slur, but they refuse to say it. Like, surely they know what autism is. Like, surely Victor was able to clock, okay, Harlan is nonverbal autistic. Why are they refusing to say it? This is really weird to me. Anyways, Five and Victor are disagreeing with each other and they basically big dick each other with their powers. And then Five wins, obviously. So Victor is like, fine, just let me say goodbye. So he goes back to the farm to say goodbye, except for the fact that Victor tries to sneak Sissy and Harlan away from the farm. So that they could go to 2019 and live a beautiful and happy life together. Psych, that doesn't happen because as they're driving away from the farm on the road are cop cars because Carl's brother is a cop. Makes sense. And also, Sissy left a note for Carl. So she was like, obvious. It's like she was asking to get caught, even though I know she wasn't. But God, girl, don't leave a note. The cop brother in law arrests Victor, but then Victor uses his powers to blow up the cops. But then he gets knocked out. So Victor's down for the count. Luther goes to retrieve Allison, but then she's like, okay, I have to talk to Ray about this. Like, I can't just leave my husband. So Luther's like, okay, I will see you there. So Luther leaves and goes back to Elliot's apartment. Allison does not want to leave the 60s because she has a husband that she actually loves and she built a life and it's very beautiful and she does not want to give that up. So then she proposes, like, Raymond, come with me, like, come to 2019 with me. But Raymond chooses to stay in the 60s because he's like, even though I love the fact that Obama became president, I do not belong there. I belong here and you belong over there. And that is the sad truth of this life. So then Allison offers to rumor away his memories of her so that even when she's gone, he doesn't remember her. Like, that hurt isn't with him because he doesn't remember her. But Raymond is like, no, I don't want you to do that because I would rather have that single year with you than a lifetime with someone else. This is so beautiful. It's so romantic. Like, this, Ray is the perfect guy. And spoiler alert, we're never going to see him again after this. And this beautiful, beautiful moment is destroyed when the Swedes attack Allison's home. So Allison has to deal with that now. Fuck you guys, I guess. A huge fight ensues, and Allison basically rumors one of the Swedes, like the main Swede. There's truly a main Swede that we have to deal with, but she rumors the main Swede to kill his brother, the other Swede. So now there's only one Swede remaining. So because all of this happened, Diego was kidnapped by Lila, Victor was knocked out by the police, and Allison had to deal with the fucking Swedes. The only people to make it to the rendezvous on time are Luther, Klaus, Ben, and Five. So the briefcase leaves without them. That's awesome. Okay, so episode 8 is called The Seven Stages. Victor has been captured by the FBI and he is being questioned using various methods of torture, such as electrocution and some weird form of LSD, because the FBI agents think that Victor is a Russian spy. This makes sense. His name is Victor and he speaks Russian. The LSD that they give him, I don't actually know if it's LSD. The LSD that they give him causes Victor to hallucinate being at the academy with the rest of his siblings and Reginald. And he's basically, in his LSD hallucination, he's being forced to eat a brain, which is representative of regaining his memories. The reason Victor hasn't regained his memories yet is because he subconsciously does not want to. Like, he has been resisting regaining his memories for the entire time that he has been in Dallas. So this is basically just his subconscious forcing him to reconcile with everything that he's been trying to avoid, basically. While this is happening, post being rumored into murdering his brother, the remaining Swede, the third Swede, realizes that the handler set the Swedes up for failure. The handler was like, they're gonna fail, obviously. So he vows to kill the handler. Please do. My darling Grace, she confronts Reginald about his involvement with JFK's assassination, and she effectively breaks up with Reginald because he was, in fact, planning on assassinating JFK, or at least he is involved with the assassination in some way, because the show implies that the Majestic 12 orchestrated JFK's assassination, but Reginald was the only one who was like, we should not assassinate JFK. Then the others were like, no, we have to. So it's kind of implying that Reggie has a moral center, and that moral center is JFK, but we're not going to touch that anymore. Because the briefcase left without the family to 2019, Five decides that the only way to get themselves out of the situation is to meet up with his younger old man self in order to prevent old man Five from transforming into teenage Five during his time travel. Because you know how Five entered the apocalypse the first time when he was 12 years old? He was there for 40 years, so then he ended up being like 50 something. And then he was with the commission for 5 more years, so he ended up being in his mid 50s, which is why Five right now is a 58-year-old man in a 12-year-old's body, like that thing. They go over to old man Five because they're like, hey, don't fuck up again. The plan is also to like steal. I don't have Old Man 5 on the board. I don't know why I'm pointing. The plan is also to steal Old Man Five's briefcase because commission agents, they all have briefcases. They want to steal the briefcase so that they can easily travel back to 2019. Very easy. This is problematic because one, Five is the best known assassin and the most dangerous assassin in all of space and time. And two, you are not supposed to exist alongside yourself in the same timeline. If you do happen to exist alongside yourself in the same timeline, like there are two of you in one space and time, this causes paradoxicosis, and there are 7 stages of paradoxicosis, and they are denial, itching, extreme thirst and urination, excessive gas, acute paranoia, uncontrolled perspiration, homicidal rage. Awesome. So reading that list out loud, I can't help get the really unsettling feeling that this list was curated because someone had a really strange fetish that they wanted to see 14-year-old Aiden Gallagher act out. Is that too dark to say? I don't know. I fear for this young boy. I hope he's happy. He has an insane Instagram. His Instagram really annoys me, but I don't follow it. Sometimes I will go on it to see like, have you fixed it? Nope. It's a really bad Instagram, but nonetheless, I hope you're happy. Luther tags along on this plan to go meet up with Old Man 5 because he has to keep an eye on 5 to make sure that things don't go wrong, and also to make sure that 5 doesn't kill himself. They find Old Man 5 at an Irish pub because 5 is canonically Irish. We do learn, I don't even think we actually learned this in season 3. I think this was just kind of like revealed in promo pic. I don't think they say in season 3 5 is Irish, but he is Irish and this means a lot to me. Teenage 5, hour 5 is actively tweaking the entire time, more than usual. He's always kind of tweaking just in general, but he's tweaking more than usual. Old Man 5, while he is alone with Luther, proposes to Luther a new plan that they, the two of them, travel back to 2019 in order to placate 2019 Victor and prevent the end of the world. And then he also proposes homicide slash suicide. I don't know which one it is. It could be both. While this is happening, Diego is at the commission. He's very mad at Lila for lying to him, kidnapping him, and whatnot. But basically, Lila strikes a deal with the handler. She's like, I want Diego to be a part of my team because you said that I could pick a team because I'm head of security. I want Diego to be on my team. And the handler's like, okay, but if he fucks up, then you have to kill him. And Lila's like, he's not going to fuck up. It's going to be fine. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be fine. Diego immediately skips out on orientation and he takes control of the infinite switchboard, which is basically the room where the commission monitors the entire timeline. And it's here in the infinite switchboard where Diego figures out the cause of the second apocalypse. So basically, the main catalyst to the change in the timeline is that there's an explosion at the FBI building during JFK's tour during Dallas, like when he's driving through Dallas, the big parade. So the explosion prevents JFK from getting shot and assassinated. And because of this, he declares nuclear war on the USSR because the US government believes that the USSR blew up the FBI building. So nuclear war occurs, but actually it wasn't Russia that blew up the FBI building. It was Victor who blew up the FBI building because if you remember, Victor is currently actively being tortured by the FBI via electrocution and LSD. So Victor is confirmed to always be the bomb that will cause the end of the world. This, I think, as a concept is so cool. I think you could do a lot with this concept in terms of like drama and tension, but also character growth and like relationship development. Unfortunately, the writers of the Umbrella Academy do not see the vision that I'm currently seeing. Listen, I'm just going to tell you right now, Victor is not the cause of the apocalypse in season 3, and he will never be the cause of the apocalypse again. Super disappointing to me. Okay, so moving on to Allison. Allison and Raymond now have a dead white man on their couch. This is super not good for them. Then Klaus arrives to help take care of the body, except he doesn't actually help to take care of the body, but he is there for moral support. Diego eventually arrives with Herb. Herb is one of the commission agents. He's not on the flowchart. It doesn't matter. They share the news that Victor is once again the cause of the apocalypse. Ray is currently having a panic attack about the 24 hours that he has recently experienced. He's truly experiencing the worst 72 hours of his life. Allison, Diego, and Klaus get to the FBI building just as Victor's powers explode due to being electrocuted and also on LSD and also re-experiencing the horrors of your childhood all over again. The explosion is basically Victor, the center point, and then all of the energy is shooting out from Victor, and it's basically causing this like pressure that Diego and Allison and Klaus can't get through, and it's killed everyone, not in the FBI building, but on that floor of the FBI building. Also, the entire time that Victor is being tortured and electrocuted and whatever, Harlan is also being tortured in the same exact way, because if you remember, when Victor resuscitated Harlan after Harlan drowned, some of Victor's essence, powers, energy, or whatever transferred into Harlan, so they're connected via Victor's powers. Not cool. So episode 9 is 7:43. Allison, Diego, and Klaus fail to get Victor amidst the power surge or whatever, like the explosion of Victor's powers. So Ben, who is a ghost and literally not affected by any of this, goes to Victor and talks him down by entering Victor's mind palace. And it's very sweet. Ben basically reassures Victor that he's not a monster and that he's loved, and that even though he is the cause of the apocalypse, again, like they can all work together to like help Victor control his powers. Also, Ben dies again. So he goes to heaven after saving Victor. It's super cool. I love that the only sibling we actually have the balls to kill is the sibling that's already technically dead. I love that so much. It's super cool. I clicked the button to move the slide so that we can get an X on Ben's face, but then I put an X on AJ's face, even though I know he's not dead yet, but I guess I put it prematurely. We'll get there eventually. Okay, but anyways, Ben's dead. Hallelujah. We're gonna miss you, King. Ben basically sacrificed his essence, his spirit, in order to save Victor, because Victor is going through a major panic attack. Meanwhile, nearby, Luther is having a really hard time dealing with both of the fives because both fives are dealing with paradox psychosis and they are so intent on murdering each other. It's insane. He's really trying to deal with two of the most insane people in the entire fucking world, and it's not super working out great for him, but he eventually manages to deal with it. Luther and our five normal 12-year-old body 5 managed to shove Old Man 5 into the time vortex that sent him to 2019. Do I know if Old Man 5 still ends up becoming a 58-year-old man in 12-year-old's body? No clue. They're not going to answer that question for me. I don't care. Unfortunately, while they were shoving Old Man 5 into the vortex 2019, the briefcase got smashed, so that was a waste. Also, all of this is happening. Victor getting tortured by the FBI, Allison murdering a Swede, 5 fighting his younger Old Man 5 self. This all happens on the same day that Kennedy is in Dallas and he gets assassinated in Dallas. So Kennedy is actively on the road right now and he is about to turn the corner on which he gets assassinated. Because Victor has been saved by Ben and he is no longer about to blow up the FBI building and cause nuclear warfare, Diego turns his attention to JFK, who is approaching any minute now, and he is trying so hard to save JFK, except that JFK still gets shot, so he's still assassinated. We are not living in an alternate reality in which JFK was not assassinated. Diego tackles Reginald, who, if you will recall, was seen on the Frankel footage standing on the grassy knoll at the time when JFK was assassinated. Turns out it's not Reginald, it is Reginald's skeletal looking chauffeur. It was a ploy. JFK is assassinated. The end. No, I'm kidding. Not the end. And then we see the Majestic 12 celebrating JFK's assassination in the Tiki Lounge. And this is when we learn that Reginald was the only one of the Majestic 12 that didn't want JFK to get assassinated. I told you this earlier. I was jumping the gun a bit. This is also where we learned that Reginald was giving them technology so that they could go to the moons. But then they threatened to expose Reginald if he doesn't keep supplying them with his technology. So he takes off his skin suit and murders all of them. I think it was confirmed beforehand that Reginald was an alien, but like when it was confirmed, he still had his human skin suit on. So this is the first time that we are seeing him without his skin suit. I mean, we only see the back of his head without the skin suit, but still. So he's an alien confirmed and it's super awesome and they're actually never going to touch upon that again. Like it's never going to come up again. And the fact that Reginald is an alien is just going to sit here and it's not going to have any bearing on the plot or any of the characters in any single way whatsoever. Jesus Christ. The handler orders Lila to kill Diego, even though Lila is in love with Diego, and then Herb tells Lila that her parents weren't murdered in a robbery, which is what Lila always believed. Her parents were actually murdered by 5, which is true, but I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. 5 was sent by the handler to kill Lila's parents because the handler wanted Lila. Like she wanted Lila, so she forcibly adopted her by murdering her parents. And then the handler also implies that Diego was at the commission because he knew all along that 5 had murdered her parents and that Diego was covering for 5's assassination. And then this is also when the handler swallows fish AJ Carmichael whole. Like the fish head was in a fish bowl. AJ Carmichael before this had like hinted to Herb to go look for file 743 because AJ Carmichael is trying to expose the handler, except that the handler faked the order so that it seemed like AJ Carmichael was the one who put out the order when in actuality it was the handler who put out the kill order. Does this make sense? It doesn't make sense. AJ Carmichael is dead, so the X is appropriate now. So Sissy and Carl find Harlan having a seizure because he is spiritually connected to Victor via Victor's powers, and Carl attempts to take Harlan to the psychiatric facility in order to get help for his nonverbal autism, but also because he just does not want to deal with his autistic son anymore. Sissy pulls a gun on Carl and tells Carl to leave them alone because she hates them and he sucks. Why is this here? I don't want this to be here. This wasn't there before. Fuck this. Carl and Sissy wrestle for the gun, but then the gun goes off in Harlan's direction. But before it can hit Harlan in the chest, Harlan uses Victor's powers to repel the bullet directly into Carl's chest. So Carl is dead. I am also just realizing that I accidentally put Carl's dead person X on his image too early because it came up before Ben's image. So if you were paying attention to the visuals, you got a spoiler. Carl is dead. But if you weren't paying attention, then good for you. Anyway, so Carl's dead. Rest in peace. Thank God. Don't like him. So it's awesome that Carl's dead. Thank you for that. But it's not very awesome how he died because now Harlan is experiencing a major panic attack. And his panic attack triggers Victor's powers, and it basically causes this sort of like weather explosion at the farm. Harlan's inability to control Victor's powers and just the general destructiveness of Victor's powers sets Harlan up to be the bomb of the apocalypse. So now Harlan is the apocalypse bomb. Awesome. Okay, and then episode 10, the end of something, we get a flashback to 2006, which is when Ben died for the first time. Barely has a purpose within the plot, but I do think that the main purpose for this scene is because the showrunners were contractually obligated to bring back the teenage cast. They're fine, like they don't really get a lot to do. We do kind of have to listen to Reginald blame them for Ben's death, which is super awesome and super chill. Also, we still do not know how Ben died. So if you're wondering about that, you will have to wait for a while. We do find out how Ben died. It's just gonna be a while. The main point of this flashback is that we learn basically immediately after Ben's funeral, Klaus summons Ben's ghost, convinces Ben's ghost not to go towards the light and not to go towards heaven, to just kind of hang out or whatever. And this sets up the idea that Klaus thinks the reason Ben stayed on this mortal plane for so long and why Ben stuck around Klaus all these years is because Klaus basically stopped Ben from entering heaven. Ben only had one chance to go to heaven and Klaus basically ruined that. So Ben was unable to move on after that. Does that make sense? Doesn't barely make sense in the show, but whatever. So jumping ahead a little bit, Victor at some point in the episode confirms to Klaus that Ben didn't stay with Klaus on the mortal plane because Klaus had prevented him from going to heaven. It was because Ben was too scared to move on, which makes sense. He died when he was 17. He is technically still 17, even though they have two different actors to play Ben. But you know what? Whatever. It makes sense to me, and it's beautiful. In Dallas, 1963, the media basically suspects the Hargreaves siblings of being KGB agents. Everyone except for 5, who the media believes is a child being held hostage by the rest of the siblings. Somehow, despite all of the siblings never being seen together, like as a unit, they have never been seen together, but somehow the media has pinned all of these people as being in cahoots with each other. How they did that, not super sure. Also, like, it's the 60s, so surely they don't have the technology to like hack into cameras, so surely there's no way the media actually was able to put together a viable case to be like, yes, these 5 people are KGB agents and they kidnapped this poor helpless child. While the siblings are trying to plan their next move, Victor has a vision of Harlan's panic attack at the farm, so he rallies the troops and they all head to the farm where there is a snowstorm because I guess Harlan's powers via Victor causes weather. or it fucks up weather. Don't know, don't care. Harlan is genuinely suffocating inside of a power vortex of his own making. So Victor tries to talk him down, and while Victor is trying to talk him down, Lila and the handler shows up, and the handler basically tells them that as the head of the commission, because she's head of commission, 5, because he assassinated the board of directors, which creates a bit of a tizzy. 1, because the handler set him up for that, like the handler was the one who told him to assassinate the board of directors, and 2, because 5 never told anyone in his family that he had assassinated the board of directors, so this comes as a bit of a shock to them. So then an army of commission agents kind of just pop out of the space-time continuum, and they show up to kill the Hargreaves, and then they just immediately begin gunning down the Hargreaves family, except they're fine. Everyone's fine. So the entire family gets shot at, but then Victor, who is taking a little break from talking down Harlan from his panic attack, Victor shows up in perfect control of his powers and absolutely decimates the entire army of commission agents. So the entire army of background actors that were hired to play the army of commission agents, they are decimated within a minute of their arrival. Truly a waste of perfectly good background actors. I hope they were paid well. I highly doubt they were. Also, during this fight scene, we discover that Lila has powers because she was one of the 42, or is it 43? 40-something children miraculously born on October 1st, 1989. And she has the power to copy anyone's powers. So she's able to like rumor Alice stop breathing. I am mentioning this one specifically because Luther has to give her mouth to mouth, and it's kind of a continuation of their weird incestuous non-biological sibling relationship. Kind of not really sure how I take it. You can take it how you want to take it, but basically Allison can't breathe and Luther is like, I need to help you start breathing mouth to mouth. I feel like the insistence upon continuing the weird relationship between Luther and Allison is some sort of weird fetish that someone in the writer's room has. I can't confirm this. This is alleged, but this is what I feel in my heart. So the handler's big plan in all of this, and going directly to the farm and trying to kill the entire family and Sissy as well, is because she wants to forcibly adopt Harlan in the same way as she forcibly adopted Lila, i.e. by killing Sissy. And the reason that the handler wants Harlan now is because Harlan has Victor's powers, and she basically just wants power, essentially. Like, that's kind of what she wants. Like, she's someone who at her core wants power. At the same time, 5 reveals to Lila the truth about her parents' death and her relationship with the handler. He basically tells her like the handler orchestrated her parents' assassination because she wanted Lila for her powers. Rightfully so, Lila starts freaking the fuck out. She's not happy about this revelation, but then Diego starts talking her down because they're in love. He tells her that he loves her and that he knows what she's going through, and it's very beautiful, it's very sweet, it's a very nice touching moment between Diego and Lila, and also the rest of the family is there. But then the handler comes out of nowhere and she shoots every single one of them, so every single one of them is dead. So they're all dead except for 5. I'll explain why 5 is alive in a little bit miraculous. He's been shot, like, just be clear, he's been shot, he's just not dead yet. Anyway, so the handler comes, she shoots all of them, they are all dead except for 5, and then she's about to shoot 5 to kill him and to like finally win the war against 5 or whatever. And then the 3rd Swede comes, he arrives, and then he shoots the handler. So she is dead. And then the 3rd Swede goes up to 5, and the 3rd Swede is about to shoot 5 and kill him for good, but then 5 time travels to just before the handler shoots all of them. So they're all alive again, and then 5 prevents the handler from shooting all of them. He takes her gun, and then suddenly out of nowhere, the 3rd Swede comes, shoots the handler, so the handler is dead again. And then the 3rd Swede is about to kill the rest of them, but then 5 is like, we're done. Just let it go, man. I don't want to do this anymore. She's dead. She's the main problem. So the 3rd Swede is like, okay, bet. So he leaves. Everyone's fine again. But then actually Lila leaves because remember, she's going through a lot of trauma right now and she just realized that her entire life has been a lie. So she leaves. Everyone else is fine. And then Victor manages to retract his powers from Harlan, so now Harlan has no more powers and he's perfectly normal again. But then actually Harlan isn't actually normal again, because in the ending montage when we see everyone like going about their lives and like moving on from all of this trauma and stuff, we see that Harlan actually still has a little bit of Victor's powers because he makes a bird float. Not like a real bird, but like a wooden bird. It's like a toy. Victor tries to get Sissy and Harlan to come with them to 2019, but Sissy is like, I love you so much. Your family is dangerous. And shit's always gonna happen with your family, and I can't do that to Harlan. Like, I gotta protect my son, but I love you, baby. And if we happen to find each other again, you bet I'm gonna be with you. So these two break up. Very sad, very beautiful. They end up leaving Texas. I don't know. I think they're going to California. Dave goes off to war. Raymond finds a letter that Allison wrote to him. It's very sad. It's very touching. It's basically like, I love you so much and I wish I didn't have to leave, but I will remember the year we had together very, very fondly. Third Swede's fine. The Colt is fine. So they use a briefcase that once belonged to one of the many, many, many commission agents that have been decimated by Victor's powers. So they use one of those briefcases to go back to 2019, and they successfully go back to 2019, except it's not the correct timeline, because if you remember, they fucked up the timeline so severely that there is no more Umbrella Academy. Also, Reginald's alive, by the way. I dropped the gun on that one. He's fully alive. He didn't kill himself. You can remember in season 1 it's revealed that he killed himself in order to bring the siblings back, prevent the end of the world. Yeah, Reginald's alive in this timeline, and he also adopted a completely different set of children when he was forming his band of child superheroes. So these guys in this timeline, not his adopted children, except for Ben. Because remember, Ben was dead. Reginald couldn't see him at the dinner, so Reginald didn't know that he had originally adopted Ben in the first timeline. So he adopted Ben again, not knowing that there was already a Ben in the last timeline. But then Ben also looks like this. And he's gonna get hotter in season 3, but I want everyone to know that this is what he looked like at the end of season 2, and that is the end of season 2 of the Umbrella Academy. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for listening. If you were only listening to this while you were doing your chores, I appreciate it. I had so many technical difficulties while I was doing this video. I'm just so glad it's over. Thanks for watching. I will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.